If anyone asks, "You're my husband," that's the first thing she ever said to me. Seat 24A, window, 10 hours over the ocean. A total stranger with a tired smile, and a boarding pass she kept folding in her lap, and she says it like we've been married for years. "Ma'am," I said, "I think you got the wrong—" "Nope, right seat, right man." Her hand found my arm, warm and easy. 10 hours, one husband, no questions. I picked you the second I walked on this plane. 19 years, I'd driven a truck across this country alone. Ate at every counter by myself. Never once had anybody in the passenger seat. And now the prettiest stranger I'd ever seen wanted me to be her husband for exactly 10 hours. If you love a story where an ordinary working man finally gets his shot, hit subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Now, wheels up. My name's Cade Whitfield. I'm 38 years old, and I drive a truck. My daddy drove one, and I swore up and down I never would, and then he got sick, and somebody had to keep the payments going. So I climbed in the cab at 20, and I never climbed out. It's a lonesome life, and I won't pretend it isn't. You see the whole country through a windshield, and you eat alone at a lot of counters, and you learn to be real good company for yourself, because most nights, yourself is all you've got. I wasn't even supposed to be on that flight. I'd hauled a load of equipment down to a port job, sold my return freight, and my sister, my only family left, was getting married on the other side of the ocean to a fella she'd met over there, and she'd begged me to come, and for once in my lockdown little life, I said yes. Booked the cheapest seat on the plane. 24B, middle, back by the bathrooms. Best decision I ever made, and I didn't even want to make it. Because once the plane leveled off, Delia told me why she needed a husband for 10 hours, and it wasn't what I figured. "My mother's on this flight," she said, staring at the seat back. 3 rows up, 21C, and so is the man she spent 2 years trying to marry me off to. His name's Preston. He's up in first class where he belongs, according to everyone, and everyone thinks, that this 10-hour flight is where I'm finally going to say yes to him. She let out a breath. I told my mother a month ago that I'd met someone, that I got married. Quietly, no fuss. I made him up, Cade, a whole husband, because it was the only way to get her to stop, and stop hurting, and stop crying on the phone about how I was going to die alone. Her voice cracked, just a little. And now she's on this plane, and Preston's on this plane, and my imaginary husband was supposed to be picking me up at the gate on the other end. And an hour ago, I realized I have 10 hours trapped in a metal tube, with the one lie I can't back out of, and no husband to show for it. "So you're going to produce one," I said, "at 30,000 feet. You have very kind eyes and a wedding-appropriate flannel," she said, "and you were sitting alone. The universe hands you what you need sometimes, even in coach." She turned that smile on me again, but it was softer now, realer. "I know it's a lot to ask a stranger, but I've been the family disappointment for so long, Cade. The one nobody could figure out. I just wanted, for one flight, to not walk off a plane alone and watch my mother's face fall all over again. And something in that got me right in the chest. Because I knew about walking off things alone. I'd walked off every flight, out of every truck stop, away from every counter, alone, for 19 years. "All right," I said, "then let's build us a marriage. But I'm gonna need the whole story, because your mama's gonna quiz me, and I'll tell you right now, I cannot remember a lie to save my life, so we're gonna keep it close to the truth. What's true about you, that I can just know?" Delia blinked at me. "You want to know true things? About me? 10-hour flight," I said. "We got time, and a husband ought to know his wife." I have never in my life watched a person's whole face change the way hers did right then. Like nobody had asked her a real question in years. So for the next 3 hours, we built a marriage out of true things. She told me she was a school teacher, 3rd grade, real one, not made up. That she'd wanted to be a marine biologist as a kid, and her mother had laughed her out of it. that she'd never married, because every man her family picked wanted the polished version of her, and not the one who cried at the aquarium and could name every fish. She told me about Preston up in first class, who'd never once asked her a question about herself in 2 years of courting her, who talked about her to her mother like a merger. "Ask me something," she said at one point, halfway through a tiny cup of airplane wine. "Anything. I want to see what a man asks when he's actually curious." "It's been a while." "All right," I said. "What's the best day you ever had?" "Not a big one. Just an ordinary day you'd live again." Delia went quiet. Then she smiled, and it was different from the powering the plane smile. Smaller, realer. "Third grade field trip to the coast. My kids. 22 8-year-olds and a tide pool. There was this one little boy, never talks, never smiles, and he found a starfish, and he held it up to me like it was made of gold, and he said, 'Miss Delia, it's holding on. Just, it's holding on.'" Her eyes went bright. "I think about that all the time. It's holding on. I've had it on a rough year, and I keep hearing that kid." She laughed at herself. "Your turn, same question." And I told her about a night parked outside Amarillo, a thunderstorm rolling across the plains, lightning for 100 miles, and me, in the cab with a cup of gas station coffee, watching the whole sky come apart, feeling small, in the good way, the way that reminds you you're part of something. "Prettiest thing I ever saw through a windshield," I said, "and I've seen the whole country through one." "The green right before a storm," Delia said softly. "That color, that's my favorite color in the world, and I've never told a single soul, because it sounds crazy." "It's not crazy," I said. "It's the color right before something big happens." She looked at me a long second. "Yeah," she said, "it is." And I told her more true things back, about the truck, about my daddy, about 19 years of counters and windshields, about how I'd almost not gotten on this plane, because being around that much happiness at a wedding felt like standing outside a warm house in the cold. "That is the saddest and most beautiful thing anybody's ever said to me on an airplane," Delia said, and she reached over and took my hand, and this time it wasn't for show. There was nobody watching. It was just because she wanted to. "Cade Whitfield, how is a man like you sitting alone in a middle seat?" "Same way a woman like you had to rent a husband out of Coach," I said. "Guess neither of us got picked by the right people yet." She looked at me a long moment. "No," she said quietly. "Guess not." Then Bianca the flight attendant came down the aisle, and Delia squeezed my hand, and I put my arm around my wife, and we sold it. And here's a small thing that wasn't part of selling anything. Somewhere over the middle of the ocean, the cabin lights went down for the night, and most folks put their eye masks on and their seats back, and it got quiet, the way a plane gets quiet at hour 6, just the hum of the engines and the dark outside the little windows. And Delia, who'd been running on that big, bright smile for hours, finally let it go. Her head tipped toward my shoulder, and she didn't pick it back up. "Is this okay?" she murmured, half asleep. "The shoulder. It's not for anybody. Nobody's watching. It's just, you're warm, and I haven't slept in 2 days, and you've got a good shoulder." "It's okay," I said. "I don't do this," she said, eyes closed. "Lean on people. I'm the one people lean on. Ask my mother. Ask my 22 8-year-olds. A little laugh. "But you've got this thing where you don't feel like you'd drop me if I did." "I wouldn't," I said. "I've been hauling 40,000 pounds down mountain grades for 19 years, Delia. I don't drop what I'm carrying. It's about the only thing I'm sure of about myself." She was quiet a second. Then, so soft I almost lost it under the engines. "I think that might be the most attractive thing a man has ever said to me, and you don't even know you said it." She slept for 2 hours on my shoulder over the dark ocean, and I didn't move a muscle the whole time. Didn't reach for my water. Didn't so much as shift my weight, because a man who's been alone at the wheel for 19 years does not take for granted the weight of somebody who trusts him enough to sleep. I just sat there in the dark being trusted, and I thought, whatever happens when this plane lands, I got this. Nobody can take this 2 hours. Here's the first twist, and it came about 4 hours in. Her mother came back to check on her. I heard her before I saw her. A sharp, worried voice 3 rows up, going, "Delia. Delia, honey?" And then there she was, standing in the aisle, a small, elegant woman with Delia's exact eyes, looking down at the two of us with an expression I could not read. And Delia sat up straight, and her whole body went tight, and she said, "Mom, this is my husband, Cade. Cade, my mother, Eleanor." And Eleanor looked at me, and I did the only thing I know how to do, which is tell as much truth as the situation will allow. I stuck out my hand and I said, "Ma'am, it's real good to finally meet you." Delia's told me, well, she hasn't told me enough, honestly, because she doesn't talk about herself near enough, which is a thing I'm working on. But it's an honor. She's the best thing that ever sat down next to me, which was, God help me, becoming true by the hour. Eleanor's chin trembled, and she didn't grill me. She didn't ask for the wedding date, or the honeymoon hotel, or any of the traps. She just looked at her daughter, and then at me, holding her daughter's hand, and her eyes filled, and she said, "He looks at you the way your father used to look at me." And she went back to her seat. And Delia turned to me, stricken, and whispered, "Oh no. Oh, Cade, she believes it. She really believes it. Now what do we do?" "Now," I said, "we don't hurt her. That's the whole job now. We get off this plane, we let her have a good day, and then you tell her whatever you need to tell her later. Gentle, on your own time. But we don't blow up a mother's heart at 30,000 feet." I squeezed her hand. "That's the one rule. We protect her." Delia stared at me, like I'd said something in a language she'd been waiting her whole life to hear. "You're a good man, Cade Whitfield," she said. "You know that? A genuinely good man. I made you up a month ago, and the universe went and made you real, and put you in 24B. Her mother came back once more, before the second twist, while Delia was up using the bathroom. Eleanor slid into her daughter's empty seat, and looked at me, the way a mother looks when she's deciding something about a man. "Can I tell you something, Cade?" she said. "My daughter has spent her whole life being told she was too much, too emotional, too dreamy, too herself. I did some of that telling, and I'm ashamed of it. I told myself I was making her practical, her hands folded and unfolded, exactly the way Delia's did. I pushed Preston at her for 2 years because he was safe, and I was scared of her ending up alone. Then last month she called and told me she'd gotten married, quiet, no fuss. And do you know what I did? I cried. Not over the details, because for 1 second she sounded happy, and I hadn't heard that sound come out of my girl in years. She looked at me, steady. And now, here you are, and she's got the sound back. So whoever you really are to her, thank you for putting it there, even if it's only for a flight." And I sat there with a lie in my lap that had quietly stopped being one somewhere over the ocean, and I gave her the truest thing I had. "Ma'am, I only met your daughter 4 hours ago. That's the honest truth, and she can tell you the rest herself when she's ready. But I'll tell you this, in 4 hours, she's been the best company I've had in 19 years of a lonesome road. You didn't raise somebody who's too much. You raised somebody who's exactly enough. The men who couldn't see it just weren't paying attention." Eleanor's chin trembled. She patted my hand twice, got up before Delia came back, and never breathed a word about our little confession. Mothers keep the right secrets. Now here's the second twist, the one I didn't see, that turned the whole flight upside down. Preston came back. He'd heard, up in first class, that Delia's mystery husband had materialized in coach, and Preston did not like a variable he couldn't control. He came down that aisle in a suit that didn't wrinkle, and a watch that cost more than my truck. and he stood over us and looked at me the way you'd look at something on the bottom of your shoe. "So," Preston said, smiling, "this is the husband, the trucker." He said, "Trucker," like a diagnosis. "Delia, be serious. Your mother's confused. She's emotional, but you and I both know what this is. You panicked, and you paid some," he gestured at me, "some driver to play along. It's frankly a little pathetic. Come sit up front with me. Let's talk like adults." And here's the thing. Every word of it was true. She had panicked. I was a trucker. She had, essentially, recruited me in a middle seat, but he said it to shame her, in front of her mother, 3 rows up, listening. And I have spent 19 years being underestimated by men in nice suits at every loading dock in America, and I have learned there is exactly one way to handle a man like Preston, and it isn't with your fists, it's with your calm. "Preston," I said, "easy, not moving. Let me save you some trouble. You've spent 2 years courting this woman, and you just called her pathetic in front of her own mother because she didn't pick you. And you did it real smooth, real reasonable, the way a man does when he's used to nobody telling him no." I looked at him steady. "Here's what you missed up there in first class, though, buddy. In the last 4 hours, I've learned that Delia wanted to be a marine biologist, that she cries at aquariums, that she can name every fish, that she teaches 3rd grade, because she loves kids that everybody else finds difficult, that her favorite color's the green right before a storm." I paused. "You've been chasing her for 2 years. Do you know a single one of those things?" Preston opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "That's what I thought," I said. "You don't want Delia. You want a wife-shaped thing that makes your life look right. And she is worth about 1,000 times more than that, and it took a stranger in a middle seat 4 hours to see it, and you couldn't manage it in 2 years." I nodded up the aisle. "Now go on back to first class. The adults are talking down here." The whole back of the plane had gone quiet. Bianca, the flight attendant, was standing there frankly delighted. And 3 rows up, Eleanor had turned all the way around in her seat, and she was staring at me, and she was crying. The good kind. Preston went back to first class. He did not come out again. And Delia was looking at me like the floor had dropped out from under her whole life. "You remembered all that," she whispered. You remembered all of it. The fish, the storm green. I said those things hours ago, just talking, and you—" "I told you I can't remember a lie," I said. "Turns out I remember true things just fine, and every single thing I said about you back there was true. That was the easiest lie I ever told, because none of it was a lie." She kissed me then, and there was nobody watching, no Bianca, no mother, no Preston. Just her, because she wanted to, at 30,000 feet, and I'll tell you, I've driven every mile of highway in this country, and I have never once felt like I'd arrived somewhere until that exact second in seat 24B. The last few hours of that flight, we stopped pretending to be married, and just talked. Really talked. Like 2 people who'd been driving alone for a long time, and had finally found somebody in the other lane going the same direction. She asked me what I was scared of. Nobody'd asked me that in 19 years either, and I surprised myself with the answer. "Getting to the end of it," I said. "The road." And realizing I saw the whole country, and never once had anybody in the passenger seat to point stuff out to. You see a thing beautiful out the windshield, and there's nobody to say, "Look at that," to. After a while, you stop even thinking it. That's the part that scares me. Not dying. Getting all the way to the end, still only ever saying, "Look at that," to myself. Delia didn't say anything smart. She just reached over and took my hand and held it, and looked out her little window at the dark. And after a minute, she said, "Look at that." "Can't see anything. It's the ocean at night." "I know," she said. "I just wanted you to have somebody say it to you. Now you've got one. It's on the record. Cade Whitfield had somebody in the passenger seat say, 'Look at that,' at least one time, over the Atlantic." She squeezed my hand. Doesn't have to be the only time, and I'll be honest with you. A man who hasn't cried since his daddy's funeral had to look real hard out that window for a minute. And when the wheels touched down, Delia got quiet. "So," she said, staring at the seat back, "this is where the 10 hours end. This is where the fake husband and the school teacher get off the plane and go back to their real lives, and I go tell my mother the truth, and you go to your sister's wedding, and—" Her voice caught. "And I never sit next to a man with kind eyes in a middle seat again. And here's the last twist. Because I'm a working man, and I don't have Preston's watch or his first-class seat, and for 19 years I have talked myself out of every good thing by telling myself a trucker doesn't get to reach for it. Not this time. Delia," I said, "what's your sister-in-law's cousin's wedding got that mine doesn't?" "Because my little sister is getting married 2 towns over from this airport in 3 days, and she told me to bring a +1, and I told her I didn't have anybody to bring." I took her hand. "I've spent 19 years walking off things alone. I don't much want to walk off this one alone too. So I'm not going to ask you to marry me for 10 hours. I already did that. I'm going to ask you to come to a wedding with me, and we'll see about the rest. No lie this time. Just a trucker asking a school teacher to not say goodbye at a gate." Delia put both hands over her mouth, and 3 rows up, her mother Eleanor, who'd heard every word, because mothers always do, stood up in the aisle before the seatbelt sign was even off, and she looked at the 2 of us, and she said, loud enough for the whole cabin, "Delia Marie, you get off this plane with that man." We did. That was 2 years ago. Delia came to my sister's wedding as my +1, and she never did go back to her old life, and I never went back to eating alone at counters. I still drive. A man's gotta work. But now there's somebody home, and somebody who answers the phone at 3 a.m. when I'm parked at a truck stop in Nebraska missing her, and somebody who cried at our wedding harder than anybody, front row, with Delia's exact eyes. We told Eleanor the truth eventually. The whole thing. The fake husband, the panic, the middle seat. You know what she said? She said, "I've known since I turned around on that plane. No man remembers a woman's favorite color unless he's already in love. I wasn't going to be the one to point it out. Mothers always know. And here's the part I like best. The part I think about parked at truck stops at 3 in the morning. That little boy in Delia's class, the one who never talked, who held up the starfish and said, 'It's holding on.' He was a ring bearer at our wedding. Delia asked him special. He didn't say a word the whole ceremony, he doesn't, much. But when he handed me the ring, he looked up at me, this tiny, serious kid, and he whispered the only thing he said all day. 'You're holding on too,' he said. 'Yeah, buddy, I sure am. 19 years I drove this country alone, and I finally found the thing worth holding on to in the cheapest seat on the plane, and I am never, ever letting go.' So that's the story of how I got on the cheapest seat on the plane, and got off it, with the best thing that ever happened to me. If you rode all 10 hours with me, you're good people, and I want to know who you are. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight, because it gets me every single time, thinking about how far these stories fly. And tell me true, if a stranger sat down next to you and asked you to be their husband, their wife, for one flight, would you have said yes like I did? Or would you have put your headphones in and stared out the window and never known? No wrong answer, just the one you'd have to live with at the baggage claim. And if this one kept you company for a while, do me one small thing. Tap that like so the next person finds it, hit subscribe, and ring the bell, because I've got a brand new story for you every week, and I've got a feeling you and I are going to get along just fine. Safe travels out there, and if the right one sits down next to you, don't put your headphones in.